Welcome back to Organist Launchpad. In this video, we'll be talking about how to manage cognitive anxiety, specifically through attention control, and why that's so important. In the previous video, we talked about the importance of practice performances and how this can help you get more comfortable being uncomfortable. But these practice performances are not just about exposure and habituation. They're also opportunities to practice attention control. Well, you might recall the anxiety spiral from the video where we talked about managing the physiological response. And yes, having physiological strategies to manage that can be really helpful, but there are also mental strategies for interrupting the anxiety spiral, specifically by keeping your mind busy on helpful as opposed to harmful things. Under pressure, unfortunately, there's a tendency for us to focus on accuracy and to try to exert conscious control over automatic motor processes. Problem with this is that we tend to start overthinking mechanics. Maybe this has happened for you, where you start thinking about a difficult passage that's coming up, and because it's so important, you start trying to control the muscles that you don't normally think about when you play this in the practice room, which instead of leading to more accuracy, often leads to less accuracy. There's been decades of research on this phenomenon, and Gabrielle Wolf, who's a professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, has done a lot of interesting work in this area. She's found that we tend to perform better when we adopt what's called a distal external focus. This is where we tend to focus more on the goal of our movements as opposed to the movements themselves. In golf, for instance, this would mean focusing on the pendulum-like swing of the club as opposed to the movement of your arms, and this has been found to lead to more accurate shots. In darts, for instance, this would mean focusing more on the target that you're aiming for as opposed to the path of the dart through the air, which again has been found to lead to better performance. And in baseball, there's a study which found that focusing on the flight of the ball leaving the bat led to better performance than focusing on the movement of your hands. So how does this apply to music exactly? Well, there's a 2017 study with Rebecca Atkins at the University of Texas, Austin. In this study, they had each musician perform a short piece 3 times. One time, they performed it with no instructions. The second time, they were asked to focus on either the precision of their finger movements and playing the correct notes, or they were asked to focus on playing for the audience and making the sound of music expressive. And then the third time, their internal or external focus instructions were flipped. The recordings were rated by 2 music professors at a school, and they were rated specifically on expressiveness and technical precision. When they listened to these recordings and looked at the ratings, what was found is that the external focus of attention seemed to lead to higher ratings of musical expression. And actually there was no difference in technical accuracy. If anything, the external instructions on focusing on expressive sound and playing for the audience led to more accurate performances, not just more musical performances. So in terms of how to apply this to music, shifting one's attention from internal to external does take practice because it's very different than what we generally tend to do in the practice room. So it helps to experiment with different targets, just like the vocal study. Experiment with targets that are closer to you, experiment with targets that are further away, and record all of them to see if there's a difference not just in how you sound, but also maybe even in how you look. And here too, it's helpful to work up the pressure hierarchy. So at first, you might experiment with this in the practice room by yourself. Then you might experiment in the practice room with a recording device. And then in the practice room with a friend watching. And then recording yourself with a friend in the practice room, and then adding more pressure as you build up confidence in your ability to use these different attentional targets. Thank you for joining me for this series on managing performance anxiety. Hopefully, this series of videos has given you some basic ideas on some simple adjustments you can make to your practice and your performance preparation to help you build confidence and beat anxiety when it really matters most. There are, of course, no silver bullets or shortcuts, but that's pretty much like everything else you've already learned to do in music. Ultimately, my hope is that you take away from this the idea that performing well under pressure isn't something that you're born with or not born with, but it's a learnable skill, and hopefully that's something that you'll be able to cultivate over the course of time with these videos.